from WBBZ-TV Sports. It's time to beat the champ. Now, here are your hosts, Paul Peck and Sue Novoitsky.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Beat the Champ. Our traveling bonanza of bowling has taken us to Tonawanda. We're here to start a month-long stay at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. And Hall of Famer Sue Novoitsky, we've got some great bowlers on our list of participants for this month. And it starts off with our returning champion, who's won 2 in a row, and that's Chad Mee.
Well, Chad is one of our young and up-and-comers, and boy, is he a great bowler. We haven't seen a lot of him because he bowls tournaments. He was busy with school. But Mike Zarcone, one of our biggest champions, so, you know, who knows what's going to happen.
That's our first match, Chad Mee and Mike Zarcone. But along with Mike Zarcone, who has been probably the most successful Beat the Champ bowler, we've got some other great bowlers coming up this month, like Tyler Molina and Chris Labiak and Michael Kemp. Those 4 guys have combined to win 34 times on the show.
And Chris Weiler is here today. And he has never won, but look what happened with Mike Kemp last month. So sometimes these people are hungry and really want to get it.
Chris is one of 3 bowlers who will make their Beat the Champ debut. So we've got a great mix of bowlers, which is going to keep people on their toes, Janelle Sabin. And this is always a great bowling atmosphere anyway.
Yeah, we love being here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. Last year when we were here, we had a great time, great crowds. So I just really want to see that again today.
Mike Zarcone was one of those winners when we were here last time in 2016. We'll see if any level of history repeats itself. Time to find out. Time to get rolling. And as we mentioned, it's a heavyweight battle to get things started here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center as Mike Zarcone takes on our returning champion, Chad Mee. And between these 2 guys, 16 Beat the Champ victories, Sue. And, you know, and Chad, as you mentioned, we don't see a lot of him on the show. He's got something called school and a degree in chemical engineering to work on at UB. But when he's on the show, he is on the show. And I don't know how better to say it than that.
Well, you know, one of the things that Chad really brings to the table is, and, you know, coincides with that education, is his smarts of the game. And there's just so much to know about bowling. It's not just execution. He can get very deep into the mechanics of bowling.
And here's Mike Zarcone. Nobody knows the mechanics and the results of bowling better than Mike, making his 13th appearance here on Beat the Champ, an overall record of 12 wins and 8 losses. Those 12 wins tied for first among all of our bowlers here as I check my stats to tell you who he is tied with. And I can tell you that Mike Zarcone's 12 wins are tied with Tyler Molina, who we will see next week on the show here. Whether that'll be a Molina-Zarcone matchup is up to Mike to decide. And that one just pushed it a little bit to the right, did not hit dead on, and leaves himself a little split to deal with.
Well, the pocket 4-9 is a result of being a hair high into the pocket. You always hope that you leave just the 4 or just the 9. It's unlucky when you leave them both together, but it's definitely not a bad shot.
And it didn't seem to slow down Mike. Well done on the 4-9 split to take the spare in frame number 2 from Mike Zarcone. Nice little round of applause from the crowd here, too.
One of the more makeable splits, but still you have to hit it just right.
And another strike for Chad Mee, who, again, our returning champion from last week or 2 weeks ago, last month at Brad Angelo Lanes, where Chad Mee won 2 consecutive matches by putting up 246 and 251 scores in order to advance. This is Chad's 5th show here on Beat the Champ. You get an early look at the Castellone Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram scoreboard with Janelle Sabin manning the marker as always. 5th show for Chad Mee, 4 wins and 2 losses. And he will leave the 10-pin in the 3rd frame. 21-year-old college student from Hamburg, New York is Chad Mee. 235 average for Chad, and many accomplishments already in his very young bowling career.
Yeah, he's a talented young man, and he puts a lot of schooling into his game. We talked a little bit last month about Bowl U, and he's a big advocate of that. So definitely a student of the game of bowling as well.
And there are the stats on Mr. Zarcone, 49 years old, from right here in Tonawanda, also a 235 average. Mike, full-time occupation, employed by Thruway Fasteners. We all know Mike's full-time occupation is this. He may have a job, but we know this is his occupation.
Yeah, Mike's coming off, we talked a little bit earlier with him, Mike's coming off a big win in the Buffalo City tournament. Him and another Beat the Champ guy, Matt Zazowski, doubled up to win doubles. Mike won all events, so no short of high scores for Mike Zarcone.
Nope. And a Buffalo Bowling Hall of Famer is Mike Zarcone. Oh, got a nice little roll over there and knocked out the 10 pin. So Mike's already got the pins working in his favor early on in this first match.
Mike's got what I like to call a little bit of a trick, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when he's up next so we can look at it. But as smart as Chad is, Mike knows the game well, but his is he's got a nice little trick to his game.
And a big, powerful fourth frame strike for Chad Mee.
This really is a clash of the titans here for these two guys.
Yeah, it really is. You know,
These two can strike.
And what's kind of neat about it, and if you've been a regular to watch the show, you know, obviously we've talked an awful lot and seen an awful lot of success from Mike Zarcone, and he is one of the best bowlers in Western New York. But here's a younger generation of guys in Chad Mee who aspires to be what Mike Zarcone is now. This feels like a good time to take a short break. We'll be right back with more action on Beat the Champ. Welcome back to Beat the Champ. Let's get back to the action here on WBBZ-TV.
Hi, I'm here at Beat the Champ with our returning champion, Chad Mee. A little promotion here for some vice grips. Looking forward to today's bowling?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the qualifying scores, and scores should be high, so the matches should be fun, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, you got an old champion and Mike Zarcone and a couple new guys coming up, so any strategy for today?
I don't know, I'm kind of sharp. I just got back from a long week in Vegas, so I'm ready to go. Hopefully the matches are close.
All right, well, good luck. I'm here with Mike Zarcone, one of our familiar faces here on Beat the Champ. You've added a few more titles since we've seen you last. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we had a few titles at the city tournament this year. Matt Zazowski and I won scratch doubles, and I won the scratch singles, and I won also the 6-game combine scratch and handicap. So it was a very good tournament for me.
All right, so that was the Beat the Champ doubles there going on, because you knew Maddie before Beat the Champ, though, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we've known each other a long time.
All right, so you're looking forward to adding a few more titles to that?
It would be nice. We can see
right.
what happens.
Well, we know we can count on a good match from Mike Zarcone, so we'll talk a little bit more about the city tournament later, and good luck to you today.
Thank you.
Even this amount of play, because they're both playing generally around the same spot, you'll start to see a little breakdown. And I think you're happier seeing a 4-pin than you are seeing a split, because a lot of times the breakdown can create a split. This is just an indicator that the lanes are starting to break down a little bit.
Mike threw a 300 game in qualifying here in order to make the show at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. We had a couple 300 games in qualifying. Chris Weiler also throwing it. We'll see Chris as our third bowler here today.
So just what we expect, a 1-pin match here from these two. And Mike did shoot 800, 803, I believe his qualifying score was. And that's a once-in-a-lifetime score for some people.
Exactly. Here's Chad Mee, 8th frame. Got to keep putting the pressure on. I'm not sure who's putting the pressure on whom right now.
Well, it's a 1-pin match,
right.
So with these two, the person with the 1-pin, that could be a 20-pin advantage for somebody else, because they just don't miss.
Right, and really just the only difference is that that split that came early in the second frame from Mike Zarcone. That's the difference in the match right now, or we'd be dead even.
Great shot.
There's another one for Chad Mee. That is 5 of the last 6 strikes frames, 5 of the last 6 frame strikes for Chad Mee.
So that was really a huge shot for Chad, because he's left the 10-pin a couple times on 39, and he really needed to strike there to put the pressure on Mike. So that was a great tiny adjustment. I guarantee you made a tiny adjustment on that.
Mentioned that Mike Zarcone had a nice 300 game in qualifying, and of course our top qualifier here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center won the Dirt Cheap TV, $500 value television from our friends at Dirt Cheap TV, and Vinny Fermo was the guy who took that in. We'll see him in a couple of weeks, but again, another difficult split left here for Zarcone at a crucial point in this match.
Well, not too often do you see Mike Zarcone not make a great shot when he needs it, and that was, that shot definitely wasn't.
All right, and then you saw the hop and the body language from Mike as he misses both pins and leaves an open frame in the ninth, and in a one-pin match, that's likely going to decide things.
That's going to make Chad just have to come up and get good counters spare.
So, you know, again, I think that's what we've all learned to love about this game and this show is there has been no one more successful on this show than Mike Zarcone, and he isn't going to win. And it was a couple of little mistakes and the pressure put on by the other bowler. And you know, if Mike's the king at the moment, he got knocked off the throne, and we see that on a regular basis here on that show. And that's what makes this show fun to watch.
Well, with this caliber of bowler, there's just no margin for error, and that's just how it is.
So Mike will not get a chance to break that tie with Tyler Molina for most wins on Beat the Champ, but Tyler Molina will get a chance to do that when he bowls a next week's show. And there will not be a Zarcone and Molina matchup. Well, you're telling me to hold on here a second?
Well, although it's very unlikely. You know, we've seen stranger things happen, so mathematically, it's not over yet.
225 for Mike Zarcone. Good score as always, but will it be good enough? Doesn't look like that, but as you said, mathematically, until we see what Chad does here, we don't know for sure. Do we know for sure now?
We do know for sure now.
Got it. Thank you. So an impressive performance by Chad Mee. Just spares in the third and seventh frame, strikes the rest of the way. He'll have a couple of more to go here to finish things off.
Sometimes it's so easy with these guys just to assume they're going to mark or spare.
Sure, and because most cases they do, and that's completely understandable. We probably fall into that pitfall a little bit on occasion here. So it's going to be Chad Mee in a very interesting matchup of styles in our next match against the two-hander, Chris Labiak. And Chris has had some impressive success here on this show as well, too. And, you know, and it's always fun to see the two-handers. It's always entertaining and interesting and different, and that'll be our next match. Chad's got one more here to finish things off, post that final score, and grab his fifth Beat the Champ victory. And he'll leave the 10-pin, but it will not matter. And it's a 257 to 225 win for Chad Mee over Mike Zarcone. We'll talk to Mike and preview our next match when Sue and I return. It's Beat the Champ at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. We're back right after this. Well, Mike, just those two frames that caught you up a little bit, and you made that incredible spare early in the second frame. What happened in the ninth frame?
Well, I thought I threw it really good, and it just overreacted on me a little bit. I thought I threw it good.
You know, and again, Chad put the pressure on you, as we know he can do.
And I expected him to do that. That's what he does.
Yep, and it'll be Chad Mee moving on. We get plenty of Mike Zarcone, and we love to have plenty of Mike, and I know we'll see you next month as well, too. But stick around. Next match coming up. It is going to be Chad Mee and Chris Labiak. That's coming your way on Beat the Champ.
Hi, I'm here on Beat the Champ with Chris Labiak, one of our famous two-handers here on the show. Tell us a little bit about how you became a two-hander.
I actually became a two-hander by accident. It's kind of funny how it started. I had a thumb injury the night before league, and I couldn't put my thumb in the ball. So I figured I always wanted to try it, but I was just a little embarrassed about bowling with two hands in a league where everybody bowls with one hand. So I did it. I ended up shooting 606 for the first time doing it ever. And I stuck with it, and honestly, it's been a lot of fun, and it allows me to compete with some of the high rev players. So it's been great.
I think you hit it right in the head right there with the high rev players, because it does create a higher rev rate. But we like to talk about it back there. We never get to talk to any of you. But good luck today on the show. I know you'll be successful, and good bowling.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Match number 2 from here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. A little fist pump between our competitors. We've already seen Chad Mee, and in a moment we'll get our first look at Chris Labiak, although not our first Beat the Champ look. But right now, Chad Mee on a run of 3 in a row, and impressively, Sue, those 3 wins in a row have been scores of 246, 251, and 257.
Wow, that's a lot of striking.
That's a lot of striking. And there's a little more striking. You know, we've talked a lot about Chad, and you mentioned just 21 years old, a full-time student at UB. We'll talk more about Chad in a moment, but we want to tell you about Chris Labiak making his 5th Beat the Champ show appearance, an overall record of 5 wins and 2 losses. He's had a couple of weekly wins. Those came at Island Lanes and Rapids, but we haven't seen him since November of last year when he bowled at the Rapids Bowling Center. And Chris Labiak off to a good start. And of course, as you noticed, Chris brings the two-handed game here to Beat the Champ, one of the very few guys in Western New York, Sue, that we have seen who either do it or do it very well.
Yeah, Dana we've had on the show. We have a couple, but it's still one of those very difficult things to conquer, although we talked to him a little bit, and he said he shot 600 the first time he tried it. And that's amazing.
Make sure you like us on our Facebook page at Beat the Champ for all the information about upcoming events, qualifying results, and bowling chatter, all to be found on the Facebook page. And of course, all the other social media sites. And that time, Chris Labiak leaves the 8-pin standing in the back. A little bit of an unusual leave. Is that a two-hander leave sometime?
No. That's one of the true taps. 9-pin is a true tap, 8-pin's a tap. Mm-hmm. It's just the way the ball drives through the pins, misses the 8-pin. It's common for 3 fingers, 2 fingers and a thumb, 2 hands.
Nothing to do with Chris's bowling
No,
style.
unrelated.
Well, and you said we haven't seen a lot of two-handers, but you're starting to see a younger generation of bowlers that have adopted the two-hander. And speaking of the younger generation, we had a little fun earlier a couple of weeks ago when you and I had a chance to attend the Bowling Proprietors Association of Western New York annual banquet, where they gave out all their trophies to the young bowling champions from Western New York. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome to see so many kids just into bowling, and what great kids they are. You know, the scholarship money is out there to help towards college in bowling. So by all means, you know, it's something everybody can do, get a little bit better at, and make some money for college.
Jim Russo, the MC, was on his best behavior in this one, which is good. You never know what you're going to get with Jim.
He realized that his audience was children.
That's true.
Actually, he's great with the kids. He's tremendous.
And of course, Jim Russo, a regular here on Beat the Champ, is the owner of Manor Lanes too, but we've had Jim on a number of times. Jim's a lot of fun and really one of the true proponents of the sport here in Western New York.
Honestly, he is totally invested in the young people, which is the future of the sport, and you gotta commend him for that.
10 pins still to be dealt with here from Chad Mee in the 3rd frame, and he missed it. Got too far right as he went for that corner, and that ball veered into the gutter about 6 feet before the pin.
I'm going to say something here as a bowler. He was a little bit aggravated with that leave because he's been battling that 10-pin on that lane, and I'm sure he felt like he made a good shot. They were all good shots, but sometimes you let that carry on a little bit to your second shot, like your mind isn't clear to make that spare, and it's so typical when you're aggravated with that first shot to kind of lose it a little bit on that second.
33-year-old Chris Labiak from North Tonawanda works in the healthcare industry, and as I mentioned, we have seen him. This is the 5th time we've seen him on the show. Chris has had spurts. He hasn't been on the show regularly, but when he's on, he usually wins a couple of matches and gets everybody fired up. And there you get an early look at the Castellone Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram scoreboard in this match between Chad and Chris.
Such a great young man Chris Labiak is. I mean, meet so many nice people in this bowling community, which I'm sure you'll speak to as someone who's, you know.
Chris is one of the first guys. He was on our very first show at the Rapids Bowling Center well over a year ago, and just had a chance to meet Chris and get to know him. A great guy, and just loves to bowl and loves being a part of this community. And loves it when that happens as well, too.
And his dad is so cool. He's out here taking pictures, always puts together a scrapbook for Chris.
Dad, brother, friends Dale and Ken are here cheering him on. And it's a good start for Chris Labiak with 3 strikes and a spare through the first 4. Now Chad Mee's got to shake off that open, and I would say he just did that.
If you'll notice on lane 40, the 8-pin has fallen a little bit late. So his ball reaction's changing a little bit as well. But I have every confidence in the world he's going to leave that 10-pin behind him. And
is that something that you can control when you see some of those characteristics happening?
Well, if you notice the re-rack here, and I mentioned earlier when you make a good shot and leave that 10-pin, that sometimes it's the rack, and he's had a little bit of a problem with it there. So a re-rack gets you a different sets the pins up a little differently.
And that time, good pin action, took the 10 out and took the 4 on the other side out.
Well, the wrong space between the pins can create the wrong pin collision. So a lot of times you will re-rack it in the game of bowling, which is kind of a good thing to talk about because you really want to look at the rack before you shoot at it. And
what can you tell that's different about it? How can you tell that there's something off?
The 1 and the 3 can be spaced differently apart. And if the 1 and 3 are closed, like I'm looking at lane 39 right now, and 39 looks pretty good, but if you almost look, the 3-pin might be a little closer to the head pin than it should. That's a tight rack. So a tight rack, you want to hit pretty high flush. So an open rack, you might want to hit a little bit lighter. So you look at the rack, and sometimes you'll know that you're just going to leave something, so you re-rack it. So
how does that happen? Just the way the pins fall in the rack sometimes?
It's just mechanical. You know, the cups come down when they lay the pins down. Sometimes the cups, it's not always a perfect science to put it down. You can re-rack it, you'll get a different rack the next time.
So what you're saying is that that's something that you will notice beforehand and you will react to it based on what you see. That's amazing. Amongst the things you're thinking about when you're lining up that shot, you're like, okay, closed rack, open rack, I'm amazed by that.
Yeah, the bowlers will definitely stare down the rack.
All right, so Chris leaves the 7-pin, so he needs to grab that for a 6th frame spare in a match right now that Chris has some control over because of that open frame by Chad in the third.
Well, that was a huge leave. Now, a little bit of a light hit, swisher hit.
We're going to be back with more Beat the Champ bowling action in just a minute. Welcome back to Beat the Champ. Let's get back to the action here on WBBZ-TV.
So he doesn't want that. Doesn't want that rack as tight. You want to look at the head pin and see the 5-pin directly behind it. And if you can see it, the 5-pin's a little bit off to the left.
To the left, yeah. We're sitting directly behind lane 39, so we have a great vantage point to see it.
Now that one's set up a little bit better.
And Chad did not like that. Did not like.
This is where the wet dry comes into play. They've been, if you've been watching, we'll watch it when Chris goes up as well. They're using the same target. They're getting it out to outside of 10. So 10 being the second arrow. That time he got it in, and you're more in the oil, and it didn't roll up on him. So these guys are definitely using the dry boards to create that hit into the pocket, and that one just got inside the oil a little bit and came up light.
So it's Chris Labiak now in a very tight match, as you can see on the Castellone Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram scoreboard. Don't forget, top qualifier for every Beat the Champ event wins that $500 value television from our friends at Dirt Cheap TV. Those are the top qualifiers. And we can talk about our qualifying at Allie Brandt Lanes, which is coming up very soon for next month's stop. So Chris Labiak, a strike there would have been huge to put him in control of this match after what happened with Chad.
Right.
And he is unable to do that. So he's got to match the spare here.
Absolutely. So with a spare here, he'll be down 7, and he'll want to throw all 3 in the 10th to force a double out of to force Chad to double. Because he knows Chad's going up on the lane he likes too. This is when how you choose to start and finish matters, because as long as Chad has the ability to pick where he finishes, he's always going to finish on 40 because he does not like the rack on lane 39.
Gotcha. Again, and you know, in the year and a half or so, we haven't talked a lot about this part of the strategy of bowling, and I find it very interesting, and it's a factor in this in the matches here today so far.
Well, it's really nice that after 18 months we still have something to talk about.
Yes,
and that's how many facets there are to the game of bowling. It's just not that simple. There's so many things that go on.
All right, now Chris Labiak probably needs 3 strikes here in the 10th, and he got the first one. Yeah, you know, again, it's great that all of a sudden we found another intricacy of this sport that can be the determiner in a match, and I find it fascinating to be able to talk about stuff like that.
And now you look at the rack on 39, it's perfectly straight.
Yep. From my vantage point, directly behind Chris Labiak, they all look perfectly aligned. Lots of pin action, and another strike for Chris Labiak.
I'll tell you,
down.
I love watching these guys come up, and when there's pressure on them in the 10th frame, we so often see, even though this is, you know, an amateur tournament, the intensity and it's such a big deal to go up there and be able to make those shots when you need to. It just shows how good of bowlers these guys are and how good their mental games are.
They respond to the pressure. They like the pressure.
They do.
All right, well, Chris has got some on here. He needs this strike to complete the 10th frame with 3 strikes and post the kind of score that puts the pressure back on Chad Mee. Big one. And it does not get that. He missed the head. He missed the pocket where he wanted to be and didn't generate the pin action.
He did, but the double was the big thing because now he's forcing Chad to double.
So 236 now for Chris Labiak is the posted score. So Chad has to double.
All Chris really needed was 8 to force the double.
And he does not double as the 10 pin hangs, and again, the body language tells you what you want to know from what Chad's thinking. So how does that change things?
That makes Chris our winner.
Okay, well, there you go.
And that's the importance of doubling in the 10th.
So again, one little instance, one strategic point. It helped Chad Mee beat Mike Zarcone in the first match, and it comes back the other way here. And when we talk to Chad in a moment, I'll ask him a little bit about those pin sets and how that either affected him or kind of knocked him off his game a little bit. And it's a 236 to 234 win for Chris Labiak. And boy, we have had 2 outstanding matches by 3 great bowlers to get things started here. So Chris Labiak will move on. We'll talk to Chad Mee when Beat the Champ returns to the Tonawanda Bowling Center. We are back right after this. A narrow 236 to 234 defeat for Chad Mee. So Chad, let's talk a little bit about the pin setting issue that affected you, seemed to bother you. Sue and I talked a little bit about it. Kind of take us inside your head about what that meant to you in this match.
Yeah, just on the left lane, the rack was a little closed, which makes it easy to leave ring 10 pins and like bad 10 pins. There were a couple shots where like there were some weak 10 pins that just got out, and those were my only misses on the left lane until the 9th frame of that game. So got in my head a little, but it happens.
Just one of the thousands of intricacies that have to go through your head before you're in the middle of a match, aren't there?
Oh yeah, it's for sure. There's a lot of intricacies, but that's just one thing that we pay attention to now a lot. Bowling with like Brad and Andrew, we look at that all the time. So
Well, there you go. See, we all learned something, unfortunately, at your expense, Chad, but you taught everybody and you helped all of us learn a little more about what goes into this sport. Well, coming up, our next match, a battle of the Chris's, Labiak and Weiler. We'll have that for you when Beat the Champ continues right after this.
I'm here with Chris Weiler, one of our competitors today on Beat the Champ. Your first time on the show, a little nerves today?
Yeah, a little bit, definitely. Lights are bright and I'm ready to go.
Have you bowled on TV at all before this?
Yeah, actually, probably about 10 years ago down in Jamestown on their TV show I did, yes.
So it's been a while, but you had to shoot 289 to make this competition. Was that going through your mind while you were throwing all those strikes?
No, but I'm on a good pair, the same pair that I shot the 289 on, so it looks like it's going to be a good day.
Okay, well, good luck to you today.
Great, thank you.
It's our third match of the day as Chris Labiak will try to put a winning streak together against this guy making his Beat the Champ debut. His name is Chris Weiler, 43 years old, from Lancaster, and a good chance to get our first look at Chris. I mentioned he bowled the 300 in qualifying, so you know he's bowling well, he's hot. And even though we may be seeing him for the first time, Sue, I think Chris is a pretty good bowler, and we're excited to get our first chance to look at him on the show. And a good start for Chris Weiler.
That's how you want to come out of the gate right there.
That is the way you want to make your debut. Get started with a first frame strike. So now back to Chris Labiak coming off that win. Chris will try to get himself into a little bit of a groove here. We are excited to have a very special guest joining us here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. For bowlers around Western New York, they certainly know the name Frank Cascio. And Frank, you've had a huge role in the development of many of the young bowlers here in Western New York. And we're also going to talk to you a little bit about your role in this show from back in your old days. But Frank, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
You know, as Sue has explained to me, and as a lot of people know, you have been a driving force in organizing and running amateur bowling tournaments all through Western New York. So, you know, when you see some of the guys like a Chris Labiak that you've known for a long time as a youngster, how proud are you?
Well, Chris is a good friend. We bowl often together and go to tournaments. And he's coming along. I think Chris he's got a great game. He just needs a little more experience on more difficult patterns. And I think he could be a very good bowler.
2 frames, 2 strikes for Chris Labiak. You know, you have an interesting perspective on Chris's transition from the one-handing to the two-handed bowling, as Sue and I talked about in the last match, predicated by the injury. But how have you helped him learn through that a little bit?
Well, actually, Chris did that on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't help him at all. Since I knew him, he was a two-handed bowler.
Right.
Actually, he wanted to give us lessons on bowling with 2 hands, but I think I could do that one time and I'd be in the hospital.
Yeah. You're going to stick with what you know? Is that what you're telling me?
Wow, great shot by Chris Weiler over there.
You have an interesting little history here with Frank too, don't you?
Well, back when I was coming up through the ranks, there was some local amateur tournaments to bowl, and if you see, Chris himself has a bunch of titles from
amateur bowling tour titles.
Right, the ABT, which I have to say Frank here was probably one of the founders of the ABT, something like that, keep going. Because he did weekend tournaments, weekend handicap tournaments.
And by the way, Chris Weiler has 8 ABT tour titles. So between the 2 of these guys, they have 12 tour titles in the very tour that you're talking about that Frank was integral.
And that all began, for me, that began with Frank, because he ran those weekend tournaments. And for us up-and-coming bowlers, there was kind of an advantage because my average was pretty low, and yet I was practicing, I was bowling for Buffalo State, so I was improving all of the time, but I was still bowling with that average from the year before. So we have an instance where I was bowling, and go ahead, you tell it.
I had a handicap tournament, and at that time we used to charge $25, we guaranteed $1,000. So Sue, with her handicap, was a very good bowler. So she gets in the final match, and bowls
270
something with her handicap. She bowls 306, and the guys are going crazy. How are we going to be 206? You know, she's got too much handicap.
So it was what it was.
The highest recorded score in bowling history there, 306, right, Sue?
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. We used to run a scratch tournament once a month and a handicap tournament once a month, and Sue came out often.
Well, it was great practice for us. We bowled against great bowlers. Everybody used to come and show up for those.
Well, speaking of great bowling, we are perfect across the board here as Chris Weiler and Chris Labiak have put 3 strikes on the board through their first 3 frames. So these guys are battling hard, and there's the first occasion of not all pins being knocked down as Chris Labiak leaves that pesky 4 pin on lane 39.
So Frank, what did you do for Beat the Champ? The original Beat the Champ?
Yeah, well, we started when Dick Sipprich was running it back in '74, and then there were some problems, so they weren't going to have a Beat the Champ show anymore. So I came up. I was a technician there at WB and active in bowling. So I came up with an idea of having 2 qualifiers instead of. They used to be weekly. I think they would run a qualifier every week at 2 centers. Take the top 8 from each center and then have a roll off again. Those 5 would go on TV. So we decided to shorten it and just have 2 qualifiers, one in November and one in July. And we would take the top 32, and those 32 would come back and bowl 3 more games, and those 16 would go on the first 16 shows to Beat the Champ. Then we'd run another one in November, take the next 16, so it was 32 weeks.
Wow, so what we do once a month, you guys did twice a year.
Yes.
In the old Beat the Champ.
Continuing to be perfect for Chris Weiler. That is 4 strikes through 4 frames.
The action will continue on Beat the Champ in just a minute. Welcome back to Beat the Champ.
Yeah, I think that's one of those situations where you want that strike so bad. He needed that changes the whole match if he strikes there in the 7th frame. And
so just like that, again, things change quickly. Weiler gets hot, strikes in the first 5, then opens. Meanwhile, we see Labiak with the 2 spares, and you think there's a big shift there, and then it goes back the other way.
Well, at the same time, Chris still has yet to miss the pocket, so.
And
I say Chris, they're both Chris.
Right.
Chris Weiler has yet to miss the pockets. He's the 10-pin. He should have made it, but his shot to the pocket is so good right now, and his carry is so good right now that he's daunting just because of that.
And don't forget, if you're going to be a part of the qualifying here, much as these 2 gentlemen were for our next month's series of shows at Alley Brant Lanes, top qualifier will win a $500 television from our friends at Dirt Cheap TV. So that's a nice prize for the top qualifier, although it doesn't guarantee you're going to be on the show. You still got more work to do after that.
Right. But it is nice added incentive.
All right, and now that's a couple now where Chris is maybe hunting a little bit on lane 40.
No, I think he's just getting a little bit of lane breakdown, just because him and Chris Labiak are generally going to play in the same spot. And Chris has already seen the breakdown there with the 4 pins on lane 40. So I think it's just Chris has got a little bit more ball speed, so it may have taken a little bit longer for him to see it. But this is the natural breakdown.
Spare for Weiler in the 8th frame.
So interesting enough, we have a 21-pin match with Chris Weiler being up, but he's on a spare. Chris Labiak's on a strike, so Chris can start to break that down just by nature of continuing to strike.
Mm-hmm. Chris Weiler has 23 300 career games and 3 800 series, and bowled at ECC under the legendary Kerm Helmer, the coach there back in the day, and one of the all-time great legends. Frank, I'm sure you can back me up on that one. One of the legends of Buffalo bowling is Kerm Helmer.
With ECC, was there for many years. He really developed that program.
He did.
And a lot of great bowlers in this town as well.
Yeah, but I think that spurred a lot of competition with the other programs, because I bowled for Roy Summer over at Buff State, and Roy and Kerm were very, very competitive with each other with their teams during that time, which played into your tournament because I think there was a lot of college students that came out.
Oh, they
and
all
bowled that
came out
tournament, yeah.
in those days, yeah. Who was on your team? Upstate.
Michelle Reese was my anchor bowler, and her son we just went to the junior banquet a few weeks ago at Salvatore's, and her son Ryan, who's now 18 years old, just graduating high school, won everything for the junior bowlers. So it's kind of funny watching my college anchor bowler. Now her son is a great bowler and a great young man in the community. And I just wanted to congratulate him actually while we were talking here.
Ryan Reese, outstanding, one of the outstanding young bowlers in
Right.
Western New York, and outstanding students as well too.
Right. Dawn Gervais was on my team. Sue Jeziorski was the year before. Kim came in. She blew.
Oh yeah, Kim from
But
yeah.
and remember, Heidi came out and bowled your tournament all the time. She bowled for Kerm with
Yeah, all the girls
UCC.
came out and bowled, yeah.
But yeah, at that time, Linda Uvari, all these girls used to come and participate. We're still trying to get more girls onto this show.
Bit of a slow motion strike there for Chris Labiak on the last one. A very key strike for him
Very key.
in the ninth frame, as those pins seem to be falling in somehow in concert.
You know, I see more and more kids in practice, these young kids bowling two-hand. That seems like it's going to be the future of the sport.
Yeah, it does. You're not sure, Sue?
I tell you, with two hands, they get the speed and the revolutions, and they just annihilate the pins.
Right. They do like to see that pin action, but they're not going to be able to do that forever. But it's still nice to see, though, in some way, shape, or form, the PBA and the professionals still playing a part in the development of young people, which means they're still watching it, which means that it's good for the sport of bowling that you're still watching the PBA, because we all did. We all watched PBA and emulated great fundamentals. And Jason Bomani's big in forming this new movement in bowling.
So final throw here of the 10th frame for Chris Labiak. And a little bit late on the pinfall, but he gets a big strike. So Chris is able to post up the strike for a final score of 215. So what does Chris Weiler need here, Sue?
Just needs a spare.
Just a spare for Chris Weiler to get his first Beat the Champ victory in advance to next week's show. So we will watch and see if Chris can do what he needs. Needs a spare, gets a strike for the win.
It's always better not to have to make that 10 pin to win, so just
Chris
get 'em all done
Weiler,
the first time.
in his debut, continues his hot bowling. I mentioned he had the 300 in qualifying a couple weeks ago, and he continues his impressive bowling with a nice victory here in his debut. A couple of more throws to post a final score, and it's Chris Weiler that will advance on to next week's show. Well, Frank, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you and get some of the your great perspective on Beat the Champ and on the amateur bowling. And keep up the good work. You have your fingers in a lot of the great bowlers here in Western New York, and I know that will continue. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks. Good to be here. Good talking with you.
Frank Cascio joining us here, and we're glad to have had him as a part of this episode of Beat the Champ and this match, and it's always great to particularly to talk to some of the guys that have had connections to this show back in the day.
Right, it was a big part of the community.
One more here for Chris Weiler. And it's a victory for Chris, 234 to 215. Chris Weiler with the win over Chris Labiak. We will talk to both guys and preview next week's show when Sue and I return. You're watching Beat the Champ at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. Well, another good match that comes right down to the end. That was the story of our whole week here at the Tonawanda Bowling Center. But Chris Weiler with the victory over Chris Labiak. Your match kind of had a little bit of everything in it. He starts off hot, then stumbles, you get hot, and then you hit a little bit of a spot there towards the end where I think you were struggling a little bit.
Definitely. The issue that I had this week was controlling the back end part of the lane. There was a little bit more friction, so I decided to go with a ball that has a little slow response to friction. As you can see later in the game when I got deeper, it wasn't picking up, so I later went with something a little bit more aggressive that would pick up off the spot a little bit more.
But a good performance, you happy with it?
Definitely, absolutely. I bowled well. I have zero complaints, and Chris, it's been years since we bowled in the ABT together, so nice to see him again.
Well, good for you, and I'm sure he doesn't have very many complaints either, does he?
No, as we so often see someone coming on and never been on the show before and having great success. What went through your head out there today?
Just keep calm, make good shots, and I like this pair, so that's basically it. And a little bit of a stumble there with the 10-pin, but I struck enough to take the match.
Yeah, you had a great ball reaction, so good luck going forward.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, and we'll get more of Chris Weiler because he's going to be back to start our first match off on next week's show. Sue and I will come back to wrap up our first week here at Tonawanda. When we return, you're watching Beat the Champ. Well, we started this show off by talking about the big guns that we were going to have on this show, and lo and behold, it's the guy who makes his debut that's the one that moves on in Chris Weiler.
I know, isn't that crazy? Because we do see that happen from time to time where this show just makes stars. And once Mike Zarcone and Chad Mee get out of the way, we get this great match between the two younger guys, and now we get a newbie on here now.
Yeah, so Chris Weiler will advance on to next week's show. We've got some big guns coming his way next week in Michael Kemp and Tyler Molino. That'll be fun to see. You getting a sense of the atmosphere and the crowd here at the TBC?
Yeah, week one went well. Everyone had a lot of energy. I can only hope for more energy as we keep going on.
All right, well, we promise we'll bring our energy. The bowlers will likely do their part as well, too. We'll see you next week on Beat the Champ.